Write a poem using only words that start with one letter. This was a prompt submitted by one of my subscribers, Kim Kimmery Makes. Now, this prompt is already difficult. Every single word has to start with the same letter, and it has to still be a good poem. So the normal thing to do would be to choose a letter that I think would work best for this task. But since I like to torture myself, apparently, I decided to use an alphabet spin wheel to randomly choose the letter for me. Why? I can't really say. I think I was feeling lucky today. I think I was feeling like the poetry gods were on my side.
Honey, you've got a big storm coming.
That was until it stopped at the letter Q. And that was when I realized I had made a grave mistake. It also has an alphabet wheel, and we're gonna spin that to see which letter we'll be using. There's no f***ing way. There's no f***ing way. Are you f***ing kidding me? Is my luck actually that bad? No, I don't even know if this is even possible to do well. Writing a poem that only has Q words and isn't, well, a dog poem. So did I contemplate respinning it? Did I contemplate going back and editing out the footage where I said I was going to randomize the letter?
Well, yes!
I even lashed out momentarily, and I'm sorry for that. Yeah, you're probably sitting there with your smug little face. You were probably laughing at the screen. You were probably laughing watching me click that letter wheel and knowing that I thought that it was gonna be something like R or B or S or something that's not Q. Y'all are fake. At the end of the day, I decided, no, these are the rules. We are making a poem only using Q words. Now the end product, I can't really guarantee what that will be. It'll be just as much a surprise to me as it is to you how this poem turns out. So after going through a roller coaster of emotions over this video, there's really nothing else left to do other than start. So let's start. Okay, so my starting plan is to list out all the words that start with the letter Q that I can think of. Genius technique, I know. Part of why this seems pretty challenging to me is that I feel like there's so little range in the types of words that start with Q that it's difficult to imagine creating a sensical grammar structure in this poem. Like, can you list a single conjunction or preposition that starts with Q? So I'll probably have to end up scrapping conjunctions and prepositions altogether in this poem. I just hope I can still make it have some grammar holding it together instead of opting for like a post-structuralist fragmented approach. Post-structuralist poetry can be highly unbothered by sentence structure at the very least and actively estranged from it at most. If you watched my video on bad crazy sonnets, Chris Piuma's constellated sonnet is this type of poetry. Obviously no hate to this subgenre. I mean, I think pretty much every type of poetry is iconic in its own way. I mean, if you couldn't tell, I'm a fan, so it's really difficult to genuinely upset me when it comes to anything related to poetry. I just think that having a grouping of words would be the easy way out in this particular scenario. So I want to challenge myself with maintaining semi-sensical sentences in this poem. Okay, I think one thing that may help with this is to have a noun or subject that is like the core launching point of the poem that I can repeat and pair with different actions throughout the piece. That will give me the classic subject-predicate dynamic of a sentence. My favorite literary ship, am I right? I like quill, but obviously I can't say the quill as my repeated subject, so I think this would benefit from a character that the poem could follow. Saying Quinn's quill, if that's the subject of the poem, the character of Quinn takes the typical place of an article in a sentence, like a or the, so that kind of solves that problem. If I'm going to be repeating Quinn's quill throughout the poem, I definitely want to position the quill as something that is powerful, you know, justify why it's the centerpiece of the poem. And I can do this with some of these verbs here. I really like the idea of Quinn's quill questions quiet because I think of writing as an active resistance against silence. Right? It's a way of speaking up. Quenches is another verb that I like because it implies that there's a need that's being satisfied by this quill, which again gives it power. So for now, I'll write, it quenches the interests, like the quirks of the reader. I'm also looking at quilts here. Like, I think it's a cool idea that maybe this quill can patch together different quotes. Okay, what's next? I'm realizing my word bank over here still feels pretty barren. I wonder why that is. There's a bunch of keywords that I'm not thinking of, hopefully. So I'm going to consult a list of keywords online for any additional vocabulary that I'd want to add. Okay, so I found this list online and I'm just going to go through and add some of the words from this list and expand my word bank up here. Okay, quantitative, that's a good one. I definitely could try to comment on how writing goes beyond statistics and numerical reports. I can demonstrate how the quill focuses on the nuances of the human experience as opposed to just simplified quantitative data. With that though, it makes most sense to pair quantitative with the transitive verb question. So quins, quill, questions, quantitative something. Another word I'm seeing here is query, which is a synonym for question. So what if I wrote quins, quill, questions, quantitative quests, queries, quiet, quenches, quirks, quilts, quotes. Okay, so it's shaping into more of a commentary on the power of writing to tell people's lived experiences through something like poetry or even journalism. I see the vision. I'm going to keep going with this. So I definitely could use questionnaire. It would fit in with this topic of the different ways we attempt to record truth and how sometimes we can lose sight of the humanity embedded within data and reporting, but writing really has the ability to capture that humanity. And, oh, wait, guys, I might be cooking here, okay? Because initially I was like using question and questionnaire in the same line or stanza might sound repetitive, but what if I leaned into that and drew attention to that by putting them literally right next to each other? So I could say this quill questions questionnaires. Despite the urge to use quits here because it's another keyword, and I could say that the quill quits quantitative quests, it isn't quite the right word because writing doesn't shut down statistics or data. It digs into the nuances. It questions these types of oversimplifications. And so I think I should do this instead. The quill questions questionnaires and quantitative quests. Listen, the ampersand can't start with the letter A, okay? It doesn't have any letters in it. I rest my case. I could do a similar thing with like repetition and drawing attention to repetition in this line up here, queries quiet, because here's queasy. Maybe the quill is sick of the quiet. This personification emphasizes again the quill's power. It frames it as if it's this independent creature with its own motivations to speak up through the silence. So I could say quins, quill, quiet, queasy, queries quiet. Now, a quandary can have like a negative connotation, but here I want it to indicate a fearlessness of this quill to ask questions, to spotlight contradiction and nuance instead of opting for the easy or simple answer. So I could say quins, quill, cues, queer quandaries. It sets up a line of questioning for whoever is reading its words, and it actually makes them critically think. I'm going to add quintessential quips here. I like the sound of it, and it adds to the characterization of the quill as witty. It would also be nice to solidify that this quill doesn't just ask questions, it also has its own set of morals to stand on. So if I say it's something questionable qualities, like it takes a stance against questionable qualities or something like that. This would also give us a nice little semi-rhyme here with quandaries and qualities, so she's cute. See, I want to say quibble, like the quill quibbles questionable qualities, but that usually pertains to trivial manners. You would quibble about something petty. Like, for example, every time I go to Barnes & Noble, I quibble about how the poetry section shares a sign instead of getting its own, even though it makes sense because there's literally only like a single shelf of poetry collections there, but I digress. Suffice it to say, quibble isn't a strong enough word for this character of the quill. It just lowers the stakes. So instead, I could use quits here, where I was going to use quits before. Could move it down here and say quits questionable qualities. It's not perfect, but it's better than quibble, and I think it'll do for now. I've also been eyeing queen. Initially, I had thought of adding queen as another modifier to our main subject in this poem, pun intended, and make quin a queen, which would then add some more lore to the quill, and it would definitely emphasize the power of the quill and make it, regal. But I decided against this because I think it might actually clash with the message that seems to be emerging from this poem. Making the quill powerful because of some governmental monarchy would kind of undercut the theme of bringing to light the stories and realities of everyday people. So instead, why don't we just flip this method around, Wicked Witch style, and say quins quill something and then queens quake. So quins quill is so powerful that it makes queens quake in their boots. It's a shame I can't actually say that full sentence. I mean, not in their boots part, but everything else. I can't write quins quill makes queens quake. I don't see any keywords I could add between these that would make it make sense either, so what to do.
One eternity later.
Okay, so the only thing I can think of is to turn quill into a verb and separate with a comma. So quin quills, comma, queens quake. But at the same time, and that's a big but, I'm pretty sure that's not even a correct usage of the word. Like, I don't know if quill as a verb actually means what I think it does. So let me just look it up and double check. Okay, so after looking it up, it seems that no, quill as a verb does not mean to use a quill. However, it can mean to poke someone with quills and needles. And I actually kind of love this sort of double meaning. On the one hand, I'm kind of creating my own meaning, but then the actual definition of quilling further emphasizes the fierceness and the power that this quill holds over like the highest people in government. Okay, so honest update, I'm feeling a little stuck at this point. I like what we have, but I'm just not satisfied with the poem staying in this one mode of like establishing the quill's abilities. It feels too stagnant. The poem needs to move somewhere. I just don't know where that would be, especially looking at the words I have left. I got nothing. So I'm going to find another site with keywords to see if maybe this one missed some and I can get more inspiration on where to go from here. This is a list I found of rare keywords, and while I don't want the poem to be bogged down by these sort of rare words that are not even recognizable to most people, I think I can get away with sprinkling some in there if it would necessarily add to the meaning of the poem. So I'll print this out with all of its definitions and have it next to me as well while I make the poem. This is a cool word. Quadrat. It means the metal blocks used by printing presses to indicate the spaces in text. That could symbolize a pause or a quietness, so I'll let that hang out here for now under this queried quiet line. Not sure exactly what to do with it yet, but I'll come back to that. Okay, now we're talking. This is something that could get us somewhere. This could be a turn in the poem. Questuary, money and business, as well as quantophrenia, an obsession with statistics. What if all of this, hear me out, was past tense? And this turn brings us to actually the present state, the current crisis that writers are facing. What feels like at times the slow death of human writing for the sake of efficiency and profit. I'll just do a quick change here and make everything past tense. Then what if I said quantophrenia quashed, quins quill? Questuary quickness. I'm also just double checking with Merriam to make sure that I'm not being duped by this site and these are actual words, because some of them look a little questionable, I'm not gonna lie. But these both are in fact words, so I can use them here. I like the idea of using quotation here after this turn because it conveys a continuous erosion, chipping away at something, but it's framed through the lens of mathematics, which is very fitting for the story of code essentially taking over the writing world. So what can I say is being eroded here? Quotidian means sort of the everyday life, what was normal. So I could say quotidian's quotition. A quadragenarian is a person in their 40s. So we could use this to paint a picture of Quin's quill now. So we could write Quin's quadragenarian quill. I think this emphasizes the stakes of the poem because after repeating the names of this character, Quin's quill, so many times in the first part of the poem, this is the first time it's being modified. And the modification is this label that draws attention to the quill's age, the passage of time rather than the raw power of the quill itself. Queem and Quetzal are standing out to me as words that could be paired together in a line. I mean, they both sound incredibly silly, but, we do what we can. Like a bird, quote unquote, protected from wind, a flightless bird, is very much giving how artificial writing, quote unquote, protects us from needing to actually do the labor of writing and thinking for ourselves. Wait, this is kind of random, but I love the idea of using quasi instead of like or as to make a simile within the restrictions of this challenge. Quasi-quack, for example, would translate to like a night heron or as a night heron. Oh, apparently Merriam says that they're lying to me about Queen. That is such a shame. That line could have been T. Oh well, I'll just still use one of these birds that it lists here as a metaphor. Here are the 4 bird names that they list. I mean, I was gonna say quietus, queemed, quetzal, which would mean like death has taken away the wind from this bird. But since queem is actually like a non-existent word and they lied to me about that, quirkin means to choke, so I could kind of replace replace that, which yes, sounds silly, okay, but you gotta dig into the meaning. So in regular English, that would translate to a death-choked bird. Quasi didn't really end up fitting into the equation. I liked it in theory, but you know how it is. Tough, you gotta kill your darlings. My theoretical quasi-simile, you will be missed, and you will be remembered. Honestly, it's not ideal to have these three words on the same line. I mean, I think quietus is fairly commonly known, but the other two don't really strike me as super accessible. But I mean, you guys have dictionaries, right? We do what we can. We do what we can. There are some other potential word pairings I'm seeing on this rare words list that could be turned into other metaphors, but I'm feeling a little bit stifled by all of these rare words consolidated in one stanza. I know it's part of the challenge, but I can't help it. It just reminds me of like the kid who uses thesaurus as a way of life. Like it makes me cringe a little bit. Or sorry, it makes me quench. It makes me quench. I think quieted quartet works much better as a follow-up metaphor to my death-choked bird line. It has more accessible words and, a quieted chorus relates more to the idea of a bird that's choked and can't sing. Throwing a soured apple comparison in there would just be like, who invited you? Now, a shift that I am comfortable making comes in the last line, because now we've communicated the turn and we've communicated why this erosion of writing is occurring. Okay, so stay with me for a second. Just trust the process. I'll explain this. Quicksilver is a synonym for mercury, the poisonous metallic element. It's also an adjective for something that has the properties akin to mercury, aka changing quickly and poisonous. This double meaning is the reason I like it, and I think it works as like a final punching line at the end. While it could be taken as like a whole other additional metaphor for the destruction of Quinn's quill, it could also just simply be an adjective for the process of fast societal change that this poem is describing, and of course the poison adds a negative connotation. Okay. Now I need to go through and clean up the words I have floating around, add some additional words from the list where I see fit. Quirl is a verb that means, well, to curl, but I don't know. Quirky, I guess, not like other curls. So if I take this word from earlier, I'm envisioning Quinn's quill bending and twisting these chunks of metal, these quadrats that represent the spaces, the quiet in between sentences. It's definitely on the weirder side in terms of an image, but I like how it again emphasizes the power of Quinn's quill in this hyperbolic image, her writing being able to bend metal to its will. Kind of cool. I can't believe I didn't think of quatrains when I was listing out words. Who even am I? Like, am I a chronic poet? Do I need to change my bio? Maybe. It's honestly disgraceful. So up here I could put the quill, quilts, quotes, and quatrains.
You can't keep getting away with it! You can't keep getting away with it!
Quatrefoil is like a four-leafed design. So I'm getting this image of this quilt, right, made out of quotes and words and sentences. And these quatrains woven into it are these quatrefoil designs on the quilt. I mean, if a quatrain was to be materialized and shaped like some sort of panel or applique on a quilt, it would be symbolized by a quatrefoil because it's a stanza with 4 lines. I don't know. I'm just having fun with it. Work with me here. This is a type of poem, apparently. Interesting. I hadn't heard of that. Not gonna lie, I'm having the intrusive thought to make this whole poem match this form and just be like annoyingly excessive with the Q usage, but that would mean I'd have to start from scratch pretty much, and I don't want to put you guys through that. So I'll just use that in a line. Up here, I'd prefer there to be a little breather in the second line from the repetition of Quinn's quill, just for the sake of the rhythm. So maybe this is where I can reference these types of poetry. Quinn's quill, quenched quirks, quatorzians, which is another word for sonnet. I capitalized Quinn's quill like a name to present it as a character of its own, which fits obviously the personification that I'm doing throughout the poem, except for when it's overtaken by this label in the final stanza. That's the only time I want it to be lowercase. And I do want to keep everything else lowercase to really make this capitalization choice of the quill stand out in comparison. Now I'm at the final crossroads. I can't decide if the poem needs the specificity of actually referencing artificial intelligence, because you guys got to hear my whole thought process while I was making this, so you know that I had that in mind when writing the piece. But is it too broad when it identifies money and efficiency as being the downfall of Quinn's quill? I'm sure there are AI writing aid corporations that start with Q. I could put Quillbot, Q-Text, and Questionwell. And this is what that version of the poem would look like. But is that too direct? Is the stance of the poem not direct without it, on the other hand? Then a part of me is like, I could lean fully into it and have the text just devolve into code at the end that starts with Q. But I digress. I think I'll leave this out, but please let me know what you think in the comments and if you think it's better with the corporation names included in the poem.
Before I read the final poem, I have a super exciting announcement to make. This has been in the works for a month or so, and it has to do with you, so please stick around. So I'm starting a Patreon with a bunch of added benefits that are all based around requests that I've received from you guys, my viewers. And when I say a lot, there's a lot. I really wanted to go all out with this, including things like access to a strong writers community, getting featured and having voting power on future content on the channel, and seemingly the most requested, feedback for your poetry from me. I noticed I was getting a lot of requests for poetry feedback, especially recently, which, while I love getting the chance to read your work, I am also a very busy MFA student, and leaving thorough feedback takes time. So instead of shutting down any further feedback requests when the emails started piling up in my inbox, I decided I would open a Patreon that would make it possible for me to keep giving feedback, just get compensated for all the time that adds to my workload. I really did my research to try to compare what prices authors usually charge for feedback and provide an option that is at the most affordable level I've seen. Because at the end of the day, you know, I'm not a Pulitzer Prize winner. I'm just a girl who's obsessed with poetry. And the lowest tier is as little as $3 a month, which is the lowest monthly fee that you can request on Patreon. You'll also notice that the highest tier gives you a lot more direct involvement in the channel's future content, and even the possibility for your writing to be featured in my videos. So yeah, head over to Patreon if you're interested in any of that after you finish this video. The link is in the description. You could be some of the first people to join. Okay, thanks so much for listening to my big announcement, and I present to you my poem Made of Cues.
Quins, quill, quiet queasy, queried, quiet, quirled, quadrats, quilted quotes and quatrefoil quatrains, quins, quill, quenched, quirks, quatorzians and casitas, questioned questionnaires and quantitative quests, quins, quill, cued, queer quandaries, quintessential quips, quit, questionable qualities, quin, quilled, queens, quaked, quantophrenia quashed, quins, quill, questuary quickness, quotidians, quotition, quins, quadragenarian quill, quietus quirkind quetzal, quieted quartet, quicksilver.